Stephen and the rest of the team have put in to get this committee together, so that we've got agenda items and we've got reports. I can't really emphasize the amount of effort it's taken to get to that. So I really want to publicly acknowledge that and to thank them for all that work. So the meeting has now been recorded. Please ensure that your microphones are off. And before we begin, I will ask Father Michael MacDonald to lead us in prayer. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. The great philosopher, saint, and martyr of the 20th century, St. Edith Stein, who died in Auschwitz in August 1942, stated that education centrally concerns the formation of human beings for their own sake, and said that overactivity and passivity are equally great dangers in education. The road between these two pitfalls is the one that the educator must move along, and they are responsible to God that they stray neither to the right nor to the left. Moreover, they can only move forwards while carefully probing. What must strengthen them in this terrible task is the thought of what makes the task so dangerous, that of God's work with which they must cooperate. Lord God, our Heavenly Father, your work of creation and formation is carried out in time until all things are brought to fulfillment in your Son, Christ Jesus our Lord. As those involved in education, teachers, officials, administrators, parents, grandparents, children, and young people themselves, we are invited to collaborate in your work of creation and formation. Through the gift of your grace, may we be continuously aware of the solemn nature of our calling, of its beauty, and of its inestimable value. Give us, Lord God, the gift of wisdom, that we may chart a course between overactivity and passivity. May we have a special regard for the welfare of poor, troubled, anxious, and disadvantaged children and young people. In our work with young people, may we always reflect the love which your divine Son showed towards children while he lived on earth. Help us as educators to empower each human being to take charge of their own education. Lord, we know that to carry out this terrible task, we need your help, for without your help we can do nothing. Listen then to the prayers which we lay before you, and grant these prayers through Christ our Lord. Amen.
Thanks, Father Michael. In regard to the conduct of the meeting, a reminder of the following. If you're a member of the committee attending remotely, please leave your camera on and your microphone off. Officers attending remotely, please leave both off unless you're called to speak to a report or answer a question. A reminder to members and officers in the chamber of the queuing system, the chair controls the mics, I think, sometimes. First in the queue flashes green and the remainder are solid green. The chair will allow each flashing mic in which will change to red. Only 2 mics on the floor will be red at any one time. If you wish to come back on a question, please leave your mic on and officers speaking to the reports. I would advise you to do the same. Committee members will be given priority. In regard to declarations of interest, members must leave the chamber or end their call remotely. Item 4 will be taken in private at the end of the meeting, and prior to moving into private, participants other than the relevant officer and members will be asked to leave the meeting. Finally, a reminder that the meeting has now been recorded and will be made available on the caller's website following the meeting. So first, I'd like to share some good news stories with the committee, and it's a few, so it's pretty good. Urquhart Primary School. Primary 4 to 7 pupils were recorded in the spring for Chloe Steele's charity album Callambic's Cayley for WICCI. They sang at the launch in Urquhart Hall on the 4th of November. Dallaborough Primary School. As part of a parental engagement school improvement project, the school created a dads and kids group called Beards and Bairns. The group encourages fathers to be more involved in their children's education, and they meet to take part in activities such as kayaking, movie nights, hiking and beach barbecues. Through partnership with Cothram, they received £2,000 from UCVO's Mental Health and Wellbeing Fund. Sir E. Scott School. Pupils took part in the National Gaelic Debate competition this month and are through to the semi-final, which will take place on the 29th of November in Edinburgh. Leverhulme Memorial School. Leverhulme Memorial School received their RRS Silver Award this month, and the pupils were delighted to have finished in first place in the Sumdog Western Isles competition. eSchool. Registration for eSchool's S4 to 6 study programme is 20% higher compared to this time last year. 3,700 learners from 298 schools across all 32 local authorities are signed up so far, with the figure increasing week by week. Cabinet Secretary Ms. Jenny Gilruth said, the Evening Study Support Programme, along with many other formal and informal eSchool programmes, demonstrates again the success of eSchool and the benefits for young people throughout Scotland. Children's Services. Social workers Nikki Errington and Laura Murray passed their SCIM test, the Scottish Child's Interview Model. Bairns House. The Western Isles have been selected as a pathfinder for having a Bairns House located in our community. So that's the good news story. So there's a good spread. So we'll start with the minutes of the meeting of the 19th of September 2023 for approval. Can I have that approval, please? Yep, thanks. Declarations of interest. We've been through it already, but I'll just go through it again. Members are asked to declare any interest that they have in items on the agenda. It would be helpful if members express why they are declaring an interest in the item concerned. Members in the chamber, please do so now by pressing your microphone or remotely through Teams using the raise hand function. Is there anybody who has a declaration of interest they want to declare? All right. Okay. No, not at the moment anyway. Please ensure that the declaration is repeated prior to the relevant item and that you adhere to the protocol as previously indicated. So item 3, which is the outcome delivery report. This report presents the half-year progress of the 2023-24 departmental strategic priorities for Education, Skills and Children's Services Department. And Don McLeod will speak to the report and answer any questions. Thank you, Don.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, this report is the first of a new format of performance reporting that will be coming to committees twice yearly and a 6-monthly rotation. So this report provides an update to members on the 23-24 half-year progress on strategic priorities aligned to the department's plans and the corporate strategy. The report provides an update on the key areas and outcomes and on strategic risk, as well as information on the resourcing of the plan, particularly through finance and workforce strategy. A great deal of the information in the report has been shared with members previously with reports coming to previous series and also through updates on Interplan. I would draw attention to section 7 of the report particularly, which provides information from the service through our service managers around all the different outcomes that we are reporting on through as part of this period for performance reporting. It includes information around attainment and outcomes and across children's services and school functions. So there's a great deal of information in there, which I won't go through in minute detail at the moment, but we'd be happy to take questions from members on any aspect of that. In section 8, it provides information about our financial position at the end of the second quarter in terms of its responsibility for delivering the improvement plan. At the moment, we are forecasting to be within the 1% tolerances by the end of the financial year. There are some issues identified through the budget monitoring at the moment, a few that I would highlight to you. The first is in terms of our trading operations and school meals, where income is down a little from what was originally forecast, but more significantly, there has been a large increase in food costs and inflation there hitting that budget more than was forecast. So there's a dual squeeze on that at the moment, and that service is working to try and address that. Additionally, the savings identified in the 23-24 budget to come from education and schools will be reported more so in the next period in quarters 3 and 4, and this is due to the alignment of the misalignment of the financial year and the academic year, where it's not possible for education services to make savings in Q1 and the majority of Q2 until the new academic year starts in the August. So although there may be some issues around that from Q1 and Q2, the savings will be identified and addressed in quarters 3 and 4. We also have some issues identified around the children's services budgets, with an increase of about 60 to 70,000 in commissioning additional services for young people and additional mainland placement. But taking all of that into account, we continue to forecast an outrun at the end of the year within 1% tolerance. So I'll be happy to take questions from members on any aspect of the performance report.
Does anybody have any questions? Who's on first? Susan, Councillor Susan Thompson.
Thanks, Chair. Thanks for the report. I just had a question round about I suppose it's about the skills. I've had a few people contact me about the future of vocational courses at Linnaclet, and there's some concern in the community that these might not be continuing either this year or into the future. And I'm just looking for some reassurance about boat building and crofting and those sorts of courses that they'll be carrying on.
Too many mics on, yeah, thanks.
Thank you for the question, Councillor Thompson. In terms of the skills courses at Linnaclet, I would be keen to maintain our commitment to them. We'd need to look at the individual curriculum offered at each of the 4 schools, but it is an area where we do need to continue to maintain that commitment. And I think that's something that will be demonstrated in a future report on this agenda about the importance of maintaining vocational and skills courses through our secondary schools. And I'm happy to commit to look at the continuing delivery of these skills courses at Linnaclet.
Thanks for that. Does that mean that we're not concerned about the ability of the school to provide those courses? There's no shortage of teachers or support staff or anything at the moment that we're aware of to carry on delivering those courses?
You'll have to switch it off, Susan. That's it.
I'm afraid, Councillor Johnson, I'm not able to answer in specificity about these 2 particular courses today, because I would require to consult with the head teacher about the specific staffing that they have for the next academic year going forward. But I can speak in general terms about ongoing commitment to these courses if we're able to resource and deliver them, because I do recognise the importance of them. But I would have to come back to you with more specific detail about any issues or implications around staffing.
Thanks very much. I'd be really grateful if you could follow that up. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Susan. I think Councillor Ray Mackenzie had his mic. That's it, Councillor.
Thank you. I'll probably be told that should bring this up somewhere else, but since it's relevant and a number of headings under 7, 4, 5, 6, can I be told the up-to-date position with Stornoway Primary facilities, since it's been going on?
Sorry.
Colleagues in Building Services continue to pursue the work on the development at Stornoway Primary. We had been due to have an update on that recently, but have not been able to do so due to the IT issues that the council has been experiencing over the last couple of weeks. But the commitment remains to pursue the development. Building Services colleagues have been working through the commissioning and appointment of technical expertise to progress the project to the next stage, and I'd be happy to take a future report forward when we have the sufficient detail and have ended the procurement processes to allow us to talk more publicly about the stages that it's at. One progression that has occurred in about 2 weeks ago, there were test excavations conducted at the site to get full evaluation of the ground conditions to allow for further analysis of the foundations and groundworks that would be required to allow for more accurate costing of that part of the project. So it is progressing and continues to be committed to.
Okay, right. Thanks. Right. So if there's no other question, Councillor McLean. Yep.
Thanks, Chair. Thanks, Mr. MacLeod, for the report. It's broadly encouraging, to be quite honest with you. As you read through this, I'm sure you say that yourself. There's an increase in attainment and so on. Two things about it is in the graph at 7.2. There's in 2023, there's the percentage in education is 65.6. That's its lowest that it's been since, well, certainly pre-2019. But yet those in employment is 30.8, which is far greater, 6 percentage points than a 2019, as you see there. And yet there's 1.2% in training. It's really an insignificant number in regard to the other two. Can you highlight it? Why is there such a change or whatever regarding to the nationals? The national percentages is higher in those in education and less in those in employment. And in one sense, it's good. I'm not criticizing it, but just looking for why is this trend? Because the trend seems to be in another part of the report. I see that there's a downturn in pupils taking advanced higher. And yeah, you notice that's worrying to you. And we've mentioned this before, and you're putting things in place for that. That's my first question. Is that sort of trend seems to be one sense it's encouraging, and on the other sense it's worrying. I don't know how to explain that at all. I don't know if you can.
I can certainly offer some context for that, Councillor MacLean. This is, in our view, a statistical representation of the change in Comhairle's policy over the last 5 to 6 years, promoting much greater uptake of applied learning, foundation apprenticeship, and skills-based and work-based qualifications. There has been, and prior to that, concern previously about children following academic pathways when it wasn't always the right personal choice for them, leading to possibly an unsuccessful pathway into university or leaving school without a destination at all. And it's important to consider the data in the second table in 7.2 in line with the data in the first table in 7.2, which is the very high overall positive participation rates. But I do acknowledge, of course, we have had that shift from staying on rates in school to moving into employment. And it's our view that this is a positive story because this is more young people staying, training and working in the Western Isles, which is what our economy needs. It's what increasingly is evidenced as the right pathway for more and more of our children to not be going off to a university course on the mainland, which isn't the right course for them. Not saying that isn't right for everyone. It absolutely is in many, many cases and continues to be. And for that 65.6% of young people that stay on in school, that is correct. But there was an audience where our curriculum wasn't meeting their needs, and the move towards applied learning, towards work-based courses, foundation apprenticeships, allowing people to possibly leave school and go into our economy and start earning and progressing qualifications and to increasingly higher skilled jobs locally is a positive picture. And it's one that's been growing, as the table indicates, from pre-pandemic through to where we are today. And there may be, to some degree as well, a little bit of pandemic impact in this, where less young people did leave during the pandemic when there was disruption around university courses and how universities were delivering their courses during and post-pandemic, where there was a preference from young people to stay and live on the island and to train and work locally. But we think overall this is a positive story for the young people who want to stay and work and train and contribute to the economy locally.
Thanks for that, Chair. If I can have supplementary, so that was what brings me on to 7.3, where you've got your statistics there for the attainment levels, particularly in BGE, broad general education, where, if I'm not mistaken, I think I read somewhere that there is, I think the Scottish Government are going to do something about S1 to S3 because the curriculum doesn't seem to match quite a number of pupils in that state. And recently I've had quite a bit of correspondence with parents about exactly that the S1 to 3 curriculum is not meeting their children. the statistic you've got there is right from P1 to S3. It would be interesting to see a statistic there from S1 to S3. I don't know if you've got a statistic for that. Maybe I've missed it out, but I can't. I've read through the document, but is that a concern for the department? The budget and education for S1 to S3.
Someone will have to turn the mic off. So, I've got it.
Yes, thank you, Councillor McLean. And this relates to some degree to what I mentioned to Councillor Thompson earlier as well, and is pertinent to another report that's coming up later in our agenda today, which is a collaborative review of our S1 to 3 curriculum, and we can discuss that more fully when we reach that agenda item today. In terms of the information we have about what young people's view of the S1 to 3 curriculum is and its suitability for both the continuation from primary and for the readiness for the senior phase, there is no doubt that there are issues locally and issues nationally with that. And that, as well as looking at that from a local perspective in terms of our own improvement plans, it also forms an important part of national education reform at the moment. And there's definitely a sense that across the child's journey through school is the weakest link in terms of the implementation of curriculum for excellence, without doubt. In terms of attainment, for the purpose of reporting, it's always the S1, so P1, P4, P7, S3 combined that is used for the measures for that. I don't have the exact figures to hand here just now today, but the S3 reporting for attainment combines CFE 3rd and 4th level with a measurement of achieving 3rd or better. And because of that, it always reports a very high percentage. Off the top of my head, very quickly, it's in the low 90%, which is a high. It's the highest of the 4 different areas that we report on attainment at 1, 4, 7, and S3. And S3 3rd or better is always the highest percentage. So because of the way it's measured, it does portray a positive picture. But I think behind that, we do absolutely have issues around the delivery of the curriculum in S1 to 3, and the report further on in the agenda provides quite an analysis of what these issues are and what we're intending to do to try and address these issues. Some of that nationally, but also particularly locally as well.
Okay, so it's come on.
Thank you very much, Chair.
Thanks, Councillor.
And thank you for the report. 2 quick questions. 7.7, was there a noticeable effect of the closure of Committe on the provision of early learning and childcare? Did that have a knock-on effect in council-owned provision? And my second question, 7.8, I think, and I echo what you said, Chair, about congratulating the officers who've done so much to bring these reports together despite the cyber attack. It's probably not high up people's list of priorities, but I'm through other work I was doing, I became very aware that the digitalisation work and the archiving work at the museum has been really badly hit in the cyber attack, and I would just like to take this opportunity to say that that's going to be such an important piece of work for our own community heritage that I hope it is given a high priority. I know we think about things like payments and databases, but we need to remember how important that archiving has. And somebody, and I hope it's not true, made mention to me of it being 30 years of work worth to catch up with. So let's hope that's not the case. Thanks.
Yes, thank you, Councillor Murray. In terms of your first question, following the closure of Committe, the priority was to provide places for all those with entitlement to childcare provision, the 3 to 5s and eligible 2-year-olds, and that was successfully completed. That did create some. Everyone got a place and had all their entitlements met, but that did mean that some settings were operating much closer to capacity. Looking at how that's going to extrapolate through, it's going to level out, and we believe that there'd be sufficient capacity going forward in these areas. Where there was a greater problem was in 0 to 2 provision, where that is non-statutory and there is generally limited capacity across the community for that. We continue to work with organisations to look at options around the reopening of Comhairle, but as it stands today, that hasn't been able to progress successfully. But all those who were entitled to childcare provision following that closure received it, and as the cohorts roll forward into school, the demand is levelling out across across the different settings. Not everyone was able to get a first choice provision in a certain area, but everyone did get places. And we do have some pinch point areas at the moment where there is higher demand just through demographic shift, and the early years officers are looking at where we can try and possibly move. The main driver for that capacity is around staffing and maintaining minimum staff ratios, and where we can move staff to different locations, we will try and do that to increase capacity. In a few settings, it's the physical building that places the restriction on the overall capacity, but it's a service that is shifting from year to year depending on where the needs are in different communities. But overall, all the follow-up for Comhairle was met. In terms of your second question, Councillor Murray, I would agree that this is a concern for us, and as we work through the aftermath of the cyber incident that we experienced several weeks ago, more and more is coming to light of the impact of it. And whilst a lot of our attention has been on the urgent priorities of restoring communications and reflecting on getting services fully functioning again, there is no doubt that there's concern around things like loss of archived digital material. And we absolutely work with these services to continue to try and restore what we can of that. But I very much echo your concerns, although I can't provide any answers on the specificity of that at this stage.
Okay, thanks, Francis. Councillor Gordon Murray.
Thank you, Chair. I'm not a member of your committee. Just wanted to refer to section 7.4 of the report. Section 7.4 refers to antisocial behaviour, and as you know, and I'm sure the director knows, I've been privy to a few meetings that antisocial behaviour in certain parts of the town has been quite a scourge at present. And one of the problems I've had is, although there's been quite a lot of interventions, and obviously some of them confidential, it's trying to measure the success of some of these interventions, given it's quite a multifaceted area. So I welcome the adoption of the Wellbeing Web as a way of measuring outcomes and interventions, I would assume. So I wanted to ask, just to give us a little bit more information on what the Wellbeing Web will do to help address and give a steer in trying to address some of these issues. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Murray. Absolutely, the issues around youth offending that have been widely reported, particularly in and around the Stornoway area, has been of concern to all of us across the community, and we've been working as a partnership with the community and with services around the community to try and address these. And as you rightly point out, some of that work is confidential, but also it's important that we are evaluating the impact of what we're trying to achieve in that service. And some of it will come through over time in the data that we measure around referrals and reports and so on. But it's also important to get more immediate, softer data about the impact of the work and services, and the wellbeing web will help to do that. I would maybe turn to my colleague Jack, who may be able to give more specifics around the wellbeing web and how it's intended to be used, but it is with the intention of providing more immediate, softer impact information.
Thank you, Gordon. Thank you, Don. Thank you, Councillor Murray. So in terms of, I suppose there's two. The Wellbeing Web is designed for two reasons, I would say. One is for the individual child and family, and one is for our wider strategic planning. So it's very much based around the wellbeing indicators, which is, for example, attainment, achievement, safe, healthy, so on and so forth. So what it's used for is when, whether it's an early years practitioner or a social worker or indeed a teacher meets with a vulnerable child and family for the first time, what we'll do is it's a scoring system. So you place them on that web depending on where they score, and you repeat that exercise time and again. And over the course of a period of time, you can map out where progress has been made or otherwise. It's something that for those who have been here for as long as I have, we once upon a time used something. We did have an outcome measurement tool, Outcome Star, which was terribly cumbersome and complex and was rarely used for that very reason. This is a far simpler tool to use, but it's no less effective. And we're also using it for some of our third sector providers because, and it's a point well made, Councillor Murray, I think we do have myriad services out there working with a particular group of young people, and I remain unconvinced myself that we're making the best fist of what we have. I think I continue to see too many examples where a child's plan is so complex, there's too many people involved in the child's life, and I suppose that my own mantra at the moment is fewer people doing more as opposed to too many people doing little. So I don't know if that answers your question, Councillor Murray.
Thank you, Chair. Maybe this is an opportunity for these agencies to come together under the one platform and analysing their interventions and coming up with a kind of unified way forward. Would that be your opinion, Mr. Libby?
I do. Yes, and to a large extent, what I do think we need to do, there is duplication of effort, admittedly, and we're not as efficient and effective. Where there's duplication of effort, you're not as efficient or effective as you could be. So one of the things that I have an aspiration for is to have something akin to like a third sector partnership, because at the moment, anyone within the third sector, or indeed ourselves as a local authority, can apply for funds, and sometimes that's happening off their own back in the absence of wider consultation. So I think if we create this third sector partnership with a local authority and health input in terms of advisory roles, we can discuss with third sector where the greatest areas of needs are within our communities, and where any of the third sectors have an intention to apply for funding, they do so to speak, as part of our own wider strategy and with our own blessing.
Okay, thanks, Jack. Councillor Angus McCormack.
Thank you very much, Chair. And when we were discussing the budgets the other day, one of the areas of in education, the director had suggested looking at all areas in education in an attempt to find, of course, the biggest cut of all, which is always tends to fall on education, unfortunately. Now, on that very day, I think it was Councillor McLean referred to the fact that we were even looking at cutting the support to ASN, which is a very serious position to take if we have to take that situation. And I happened to be listening this morning, first thing, I don't know if anybody else heard a discussion on the radio about behaviour in Scottish schools at the present. And the inference from the contributions was that the situation in Scottish schools is significantly worse than it was in the past. And certainly when I heard some of the experiences of the teachers who called in to speak to the programme, I said to myself, well, I wouldn't want to be part of that situation now myself. It doesn't sound like a very happy situation. And at the back of my mind, I mean, there were many suggestions as to why there were these significant problems in schools, one of which, of course, was the COVID situation that we had and how that disrupted families. A second was the fact the significant levels of child poverty that we have, and we have them in these islands as well. And what was at the back of my mind when I was listening to all of this was that I had heard the Deputy First Minister in an earlier programme over the weekend saying that there was going to be a cutback in support for programmes like ASN in schools. And I just felt that that was the wrong line to take completely. And is that the impression you are getting, Director? Is that the way you think things are going? Because if it is, it's only going to exacerbate the situation that Jack's trying to deal with, rather than enhance the situation.
Can you just switch off? Thanks.
Yes, thank you, Councillor McCormick. The current headlines have been particularly driven by a survey of members conducted by a trade union, which published at the end of last week and over the weekend. And also that has been linked closely to the Cabinet Secretary's views around both conduct and behaviour in schools and associated to that attendance as well. And these are issues that are high on the Scottish Government's agenda at the moment. I have some concern that these focuses are on the outcomes of behaviours rather than looking at causes and the relational issues and the possible trauma issues that go on prior to the behaviour. So the behaviour ultimately is a communication and an issue that is the end of something rather than the beginning of something. And I do echo your concern around additional support needs. We're too early in this stage to know what the Scottish Government's view of funding is going to be. We won't know until the middle of December what the Government's budget is going to be, and then onwards for our own settlement of that afterwards. But there is no doubt that finances are challenging locally and nationally, and both Scottish Government and locally here, we're having to look at every budget line, we're having to look at every area, and try and find where savings can be made. But in terms of ASN, obviously the worry is the impact on the services, and not just ASN as well, but children's services, as we've been talking about too. And a question from Councillor Murray and the response from Mr. Libby there about the importance of having intervention services available to support young people, and often around early intervention and prevention. So their concerns are shared, but I don't have any clear steer or information coming from Scottish Government yet about what the real impact of any potential ASN reduction may be. But we hope it will not be too great, and we continue to provide and prioritise our own resources as much as we can within the discretion and decisions of members, obviously, on the funding of ASN locally. But I do have concerns about the focus currently on behaviour in and of itself, and not looking at the reasons and causes sufficiently behind what's happening there.
Okay, thanks, Donald. Oh, do you want to come back? I'm going to I'm only going to take two more now because I want to move on after this report. So does someone want to switch their mic off there, please? Thank you. Angus, you're in, yeah.
Oh, thank you very much, Chair. Thank you for letting me back. The thing at the back of my mind always is the very point that you're making, Director, that we're dealing with the issue when it happens, whereas we should be attempting to deal with the issue to create circumstances in families where the issue doesn't start in the first place. And that I'm not 100% sure that I understand how we do that as an authority and how other authorities do that. I know we're doing our level best to tackle poverty in our families, and that has significant effects on people's behaviour. There's no doubt about that at all. But how and now perhaps we're talking about the involvement of social work and perhaps many other departments in this council. How do we support families? Because I think if we can support families, then the issues will not become issues in school.
I would completely agree, Councillor McCormick, and I think some of that answer lies in what Mr. Libby has described already in his response around us developing our understanding of the needs of families and trying to intervene as early as possible, and undertaking processes such as the Wellbeing Web and repeating these processes over time to make sure that we've got good evaluative information about what the issues families are experiencing are and how we can work collectively to address them. It is challenging without doubt in an era of declining resources, and as a result of that, hard decisions have to be made, and there is an understandable worry that having to make these hard decisions around the work that we continue to do may have some detrimental effect. But I also come back to a point that Mr. Libby made around making sure that we are using our resources to the absolute best that we can and avoiding duplication, looking at how we coordinate our resources to maximise their effect. And we are, in some ways, an asset-rich community in that way, that we do have a lot of different services that work with young people, but we have to make sure that they are well coordinated and well targeted to make sure that they have the most impact that they can. And we do have some information that we're not always getting that completely right. So although we do have challenges in terms of how we finance services going forward, we do also have a duty to make sure we use what we do have as efficiently as possible.
Okay, thanks for that, Donald. Ray, Councillor Ray Mackenzie.
Thank you. Yes, Chairman. There's definitely a major problem, and I don't know if it's the size of the community or whatever, because I can't speak for areas outside Stornoway where there's maybe people are more well known in their community and are less likely to cause problems. But it is a major problem. You know, we can have committees, we can have all the rest of them. I agree with that there should be some sort of agency. I thought there was actually, where all the different groups got together under one heading and to look at this problem. But there's a major problem in Stornoway at the present time, and people in certain parts of the town, well, I won't say they're frightened. Well, I will say they're frightened actually, and being intimidated, and I don't know why it should be worse now than it was years ago, except there were more facilities. Whatever anybody says, there were more facilities like the YM and all the rest of it. And at present, well, we can't just blame that, but there's no doubt that there's a problem at the present time. And I think, we should have a meeting between all agencies sooner rather than later to just find out what the problem is. And as far as ESN is concerned, we actually cut 100,000 from the budget this year as a council. So I don't know, the problem is not helped by us cutting ESN. It's a problem. It's happening now. People are scared to go out their door some nights. So, and I know that the areas involved, and people say they know who the people that are causing this are concerned. So, why can we not take more action?
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Mackenzie. Firstly, there is a youth justice subcommittee that does meet regularly and pulls together the various representatives of the different agencies in the communities, and has been holding additional meetings during the recent increase in concerns around antisocial behaviour in the Stornoway area. And it is a complex picture because it's happening in Stornoway, but it's not solely of Stornoway. We know that there's some of that is linked as well to the fact that pretty much all young people spend time in Stornoway. Some of it is local residents in Stornoway, but some is children that come in from other areas. So it's not simply about the footprint of Stornoway itself. But we do very much recognise, and it's been discussed in that group, about the importance of services for young people like youth clubs, although with some discussion about the term youth club in and of itself. But places where young people can go, places where young people can socialise and offer areas where they can get support or interact positively with friends, and that there has been a loss of some of that, particularly post-pandemic again, where a lot of it was run by volunteer services in our community that haven't come back and haven't operated again since. And that is something that the group are looking at. The group are also have been engaging with members in your own ward areas and also with our MSP and meetings that he's been holding to try and get a handle on the issue. It's one that I do very much appreciate. There's significant concerns around the community for those that are experiencing it, and I very much share these concerns. But we are also trying to keep a degree of proportionality about the frequency and the issues that we're having to try and make sure that our response is correct. And some of that has been very high level interventionist. Others have been about trying to understand the wider reasons and to try and bring back some of the activity that young people maybe haven't had previously to avoid them having nowhere to go, and for that to lead to antisocial behaviour. But there are different tiers of the problem. Some of it is born out of not having facilities to do. Others, it's a much more complex issue of concern and relationships. So it's trying to understand these problems as best we can, which is the work that the group has been doing, and then trying to coordinate that into a response.
Okay, thanks for response, Donald. Yeah, just one more, because I want to move on, because Grant's got to speak yet, and I want Grant to be the last person, so we'll need to just brief, please. Oh, sorry.
Yeah, I just want to come back, and there are organisations, I mean, pointers, and you know, there are places which do a fantastic job. You know, there's no doubt about it. I do think that the problem, I'm speaking from Stornoway South, I think there's more of a problem in Stornoway North. I don't know what that says about the different areas of Stornoway, but anyway.
Okay, right. Thanks, Ray. Who's on next? Let's see who comes in next. I'll bring you in, Norrie, at the end. Sorry for keeping you waiting. So, Grant.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Just a quick one on 7.7 children's facilities in place to meet the needs of working parents. Just wondering if there's any update on the early learning and childcare provision for Leverhulme Memorial School. I know there's been significant issues with recruitment for the position. I was just wondering if we're in any better position, or are we moving forward on this one? Thanks, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Fulton. Yes, and you rightly recognise that this has been a challenging issue for us to recruit to the post, and it's not been through any lack of commitment, or we'll try and find solutions to it. And my colleagues in early years have been trying to resolve this matter over some time, and have gone quite far down the road to finding solutions and believing that solutions were in place, only for them to falter at the 11th hour. I think my colleague Mary Clare is on the call. She may have the very latest on it, but it is an area that we are trying to find solutions for the community in South Harris to provide the early learning and childcare provision at the school. And I know that it's a complex one in terms of the views of the community and their policy, but we are continuing to try and find solutions to get that in place.
I'll just bring Mary Clare in there, please, if you're available there, Mary Clare.
Thank you very much, Chair. Good morning. Certainly we have, as you know, Councillor Fulton, looked to many solutions to the problem, and currently we are putting out an advert for an early years teacher to work within the nursery for the period of time from now until June on a fixed term basis.
Do you want to come back round to? Yeah, you're right. Okay, that's great. Okay, thanks. So I'm just going to bring Norrie in at last, because he's been waiting quite a while, and I didn't notice you in the corner there. I'll intend focus over here. So sorry about that, Norrie. Right.
Yeah, thanks very much, Chair. Probably a question for Chief Officer for Donald. I sit on the Nicholson Parent Council, and I was flabbergasted last week when I inquired about the numbers, which is, you know, why in the overall context of things, when we're talking about Scottish Government reducing support for ASN, and the scale of the size of the budget that we spend on ASN in any given year. And I don't know what the comparative figures are for us against other island authorities, or us against inner city councils, and, you know, just the wider Scottish diaspora for schools. I'm guessing that everybody who falls under the categorisation of an ASN needs is the same for every school and every authority within Scotland. But the percentages of pupils within the Nicholson who have an ASN definition astounded me. And the weight of that responsibility for supporting these kids falls squarely upon the head of service, you know, and the teachers and the support staff that have to deal with them. I just wonder, I mean, I don't know if I'm breaking any confidences here by revealing the percentage of pupils that have an ASN definition within the Nicholson Institute. Since that was at the Parent Council, I'm guessing it's not going to be a secret. Is it okay if I mention the number? Don't know.
It's a publicly known piece of information.
Yeah, I inquired
I don't know if any of you guys are aware of the amount of kids who have an ASN definition in the Nicholson Institute was between 35 and 40%. I couldn't comprehend how many folk that takes in. That's probably 500 people, 400 people. It's a lot of people, a lot of resource. I just wonder how we stack up with that percentage against Orkney, Shetland and the high schools and Shetland and Orkney as well, and other local authorities. I don't know if we have the numbers, but the scale of the issue is huge. It's a massive issue, and it's a massive drain on resources to have so many pupils falling into that category, and the support that's required, to continue to ensure that they get the best outcomes. So, like I say, the number flabbergasted me.
Thank you, Councillor MacDonald. As you rightly identify, and looking at the additional support needs identification rates in the Nicholson, they are broadly similar to our other schools as well. It is an issue nationally because it is for each local authority to determine its definition of additional support needs. So there isn't a single national application. There is the ASL Act nationally that defines additional support needs, but it's for each individual local authority to have its policy for identification of such. And in the Western Isles, we have an staged assessment and intervention policy that identifies additional support needs into 4 levels, with 1 being the lowest level of need and 4 being the very highest and complex level of need. And these figures do tend to encompass all 4 of these levels. And a significant proportion of that 35 to 40% would be ASN staged level 1, which is a low level ASN that's supported within the classroom. So I don't have the comparative figures to hand of the other authorities, but I remember when last looking at it that we were broadly in line with the other island authorities, but had a higher rates of identification of ASN than many of the other local authorities on the mainland. But it is a varying picture nationally, and it is an issue where there isn't a single consistent methodology for identification of additional support needs. But it is something that we do have to consider carefully in terms of our budget setting processes, and not only is there a reasonably high rate of ASN identification, there is also associated with that, by some measures, a high degree of provision to meet that need. And similarly to our conversations around youth justice and meeting needs of community, we do have a duty to make sure that that resource is used to its most efficient and greatest priority. And that can lead to hard conversations about support that had happened in the past that may not be able to continue, but it having to be linked increasingly robustly to assessed need. So I absolutely take your points, Councillor MacDonald. The ASN is a challenging area, and it does, ASN pupils identified to have additional support needs do form quite a large percentage of our total school population. You mentioned the Nicholson as an example there, but that's replicated across our system.
Okay, thanks, Harry. Right, I'm going to bring this item to a close now. So, do members agree to note the report? Right, thanks. So next item is item 4, which will be taken in private. So we'll move on to item 5. That's Integrated Children's Services Plan 2023 to 2026 Progress Report. This item relates to the Integrated Children's Services Plan 2023 to 2026 Progress Report. Jack Libby will speak to the report and answer any questions. Thanks, Jack.
Thank you, Chair. The purpose of the report is to advise members on the progress made by the wider Children's Services Partnership in terms of how we are working towards achieving the desired outcomes of the 23 to 26 Integrated Children's Services Plan. As corporate parents, this should be of particular interest to members, and I'd also like to take this opportunity to thank those members who managed to attend the recent corporate parenting training. The report evidences good progress on our improvement journey, whilst also recognising some recurring challenges such as the lack of foster carers, which is both a local and a national challenge, and we touched on this earlier, issues surrounding youth offending and antisocial behaviour, which again is both a local and a national challenge. There are 5 subgroups or sub-plans to the overall plan, those being corporate parenting and care experienced young people, Child Protection Committee, Children with ASN, Mental Health and Wellbeing Group, and the Early Years Group. To the best of my knowledge, this is the first time we have provided an update to committee, as previously what was brought to committee was the the latest 3-year report. So I trust members will appreciate having progress reports provided in terms of offering reassurance that what we said we were going to do, we are actually doing. Thank you, Chair, and I'm happy to take any questions.
Does anybody have any questions for Jack at all? Okay, right, that's the case. Gordon, Councillor Gordon Murray.
Thanks, Chair. Just a quick comment to say thank you very much to Mr. Libby and all those involved in the corporate parenting seminar. It was hugely important, great information, and I found it very, very challenging as well. So thank you very much, and thank you for these new updates. These will be very important for us going forward. So just say thanks a lot.
Thanks, Gordon. So if there are no other questions, do members agree to note the report? Do people? Yep, okay. Thanks. We'll move on to item 6, which is the Care Inspectorate Report for Action for Children at Hillcrest Care Home Service. This report relates to the Care Inspectorate Report for Action for Children, Hillcrest Care Home Service. And again, Jack will speak to the report and answer any questions. Thanks, Jack.
Thank you again, Chair. So this report is to provide an update on the recent publication of the Care Inspectorate Report on Hillcrest Care Home Service. There are areas of strength and areas of concern recognised within the report, see sections 5.2 and 5.3, in terms of expansion on these issues. In response to the areas of improvement, my service met with the Children's Services Manager for Action for Children to discuss and reflect upon the inspection findings and to offer our support in terms of their improvement plan, support which was willingly accepted. The areas pertaining to child protection improvements have already been addressed as these related to recording of information, so it was quite an easy remedy for that. The issue pertaining to having a robust matching process is less straightforward in terms of our island context, where we have but one residential unit. We do not have the option where if a child is not a good match to Hillcrest, we have no other island-based residential units, and our only other option would be to consider off-island options, which I would not be prepared to consider. Really where for as long as Hillcrest has been with us, there are occasions where the mix of young people has been a challenge. But I suppose our approach is to sort of manage the challenge as opposed to, look at an alternative placement where possible. I remain broadly satisfied with the level of care and protection received by children residing at Hillcrest, and I thank the staff for their dedication and hard work. Thank you, Chair. Happy to take any question.
Are there any questions for Jack? Councillor Cal McLean.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Thanks, Jack, for this report. And having read through the report, quite honestly, Jack, I can, if I'm free to say it, there seems to be a bit of lack of common sense in this report. And I know it's hard hitting, but for instance, I go to 7.2 there, and in the report, in the appendix in the report, that is, it talks about leaders. The criticism on Hillcrest here, you've got absences of staff. And yet you're criticised because the staff aren't properly trained, because all of a sudden there's a staff absences. You cannot create a staff member from just taking them out from nowhere. And I find some of it, I'm quite honest about you, it's quite hard hitting. When you're only, again, you've been given, I think, an adequate. How well do we support children and young people's rights and well-being? Just for instance, for a simple thing like staff, and one of the questions would be, do you have quite a bit of staff absences in Hillcrest?
And hang on, no, sorry, Jack. Can someone just switch? Yeah. Okay. Put it on again. Yeah, that's it. Thanks.
I'm pleased that the lack of common sense Councillor McLean mentioned was not so much in my own report, but in the appendix. So that was a bit worried there for a minute. Thank you. Two things. Yes, staffing is a challenge at the moment, and not only in Hillcrest, but I think if you were to visit any residential unit in Scotland and beyond, you would find similar issues at the moment with staffing these facilities. I would also say that for whatever reason, and I think we've seen this in other services, for example, early years, the care inspectorate have raised the bar in terms of their inspection gradings. So I suppose yesterday's good as today's adequate. So that's one of the challenges that we have, and it goes back to, of course, we have to take cognizance of an adequate rating, but we've also got to take cognizance that across Scotland, when I speak to my counterparts, this is something that's been experienced elsewhere. Questions have been asked of the care inspectorate in terms of why they've risen the bar, because it gives a certain impression to communities in terms of the level of care and protection. May have changed. The only thing that may have changed is the grading, not the practice. So, but we are working with Action for Children in terms of mutual aid, in terms of their staffing challenges. Thank you.
Sorry, Chair, just supplementary to that as well. That is, there can be a change of clientele within Hillcrest very, very quickly. And that doesn't seem to be, you can have some people coming in very, very quickly in a day or two. And I know some of the staff, and the staff are actually, they're conscientious staff as well. And to sort of have criticised the fact that these people aren't getting the proper care almost is a wee bit, I think, a wee bit hard hitting. Sorry for using the word lack of common sense, but Chair, but maybe I should have framed it in a better way.
I maybe framed it a bit away. Yeah. Okay, right. If there are Councillor Susan Thompson.
Thanks for that, Chair. I don't know whether this is appropriate here, but I wanted to understand how the Bairnshouse will affect the service that we offer and how it will affect Hillcrest and just what the overall landscape will look like with Bairnshouse.
So I suppose Bairnshouse is less a Bairnshouse, it's less a house than it is a facility. So it's a building, so to speak, that will allow us to bring services together, and it's more in response to how we support children who have experienced trauma through the investigative interview process of that. So it's the facility is for children who have experienced abuse and neglect, and it's also for children and young people involved in offending behaviours. So the reference to a house, I suppose, is when a child enters these premises, they're not going to, there's nothing to suggest they're entering an institution or a place of work. It's got a more homely feel to it, an atmosphere around it. So it's not a residential facility. It's more of a intervention facility for interviewing children and for them to be able to give evidence directly to court as well. And in addition to that, if there's ongoing therapeutic needs, there'll be a room within the house where children can return to receive their counselling. Thank you.
Okay, are you happy with that, Susan? Okay. Councillor Francis Murray.
Thank you very much. I'm sort of going back to Councillor McLean's common sense point. Again, looking at 7.2 and the third paragraph there, which says that although there were admissions and matching procedures in place, these weren't implemented in practice, and particularly point to the views of other young people living in Hillcrest not being sought prior to a young person moving to Hillcrest. And I think we can all imagine that it's a small group of people. They probably know each other already, and there may well be tensions between them. But I think as guardians of the public purse, we would all echo what Mr. Libby said, that rather than sending them away, even if they don't seem to get on with the others in Hillcrest, it's better that they're accommodated here. rather than being sent at considerable expense to the mainland. And I think that really the care inspectorate have to be aware of the island situation when they're making a comment like that. I think it is rather unfair on the service, I have to say.
Okay, thanks, Francis. Thanks a lot. So if there are no other questions, do members agree to note the progress made in terms of meeting the strategic goals contained within the Integrated Children's Services Plan 2023-26? Sorry. I'll take it that's a yes. Even though that doesn't actually, that's the wrong one. Right, so that's the wrong one. Yeah, it's not actually, that's a mistake. It doesn't matter. So I'll just get to members agree to note the report. Thank you. Okay, right. Item 7, report by HM Inspectors of Education at Scoil Uig and Scolari Uig, June 2023. Item 7 relates to the report by HM Inspectors of Education at Scoil Uig and Scolari Uig, June 2023. Patricia McLeod, Executive Head for Rural Lewis Primary Schools, will speak to the report and is available to answer any questions. Thanks, Patricia. That's it, you're in.
Okay, so thank you very much. The purpose of the report is to inform the Comhairle of the outcome of the HMI inspection. Scoil Uig and Scolari Uig were inspected in June in a short model inspection where 2.3 learning and teaching and 3.2 progress and achievements were evaluated. The school was evaluated against the QIs in Higgias 4 and Higio The school was evaluated, the primary school was evaluated as learning and teaching and assessment as weak and recent attainment as satisfactory. In Scolari, the learning and teaching assessment was satisfactory and securing children's progress was also satisfactory. The key strengths were summarised as Gaelic ethos, culture, drama and music, and also learning beyond the classroom. And the areas for development were teaching and learning, self-evaluation, partnerships and areas of the curriculum to be developed. The department is supporting Uig School through their action plan. I am supporting as executive head teacher, and another head teacher has also been allocated protected time to support as well. The action plan is now well underway and we have had positive engagement and feedback so far, particularly from parents. We would like the Comhairle to note the outcome of the report and to support Scoil Uig and Scolari Uig to help implement the action plan further. Thank you.
Does anybody have any questions for Patricia? Okay. Councillor. Was it? Oh, well, I'll ask because he's in the chamber first. So I'll ask Councillor Cal McLean first.
Thanks, Chair. Thanks, Patricia, for this report. Sometimes I want. I'm now stuck for words because this report, I believe, is typical of what I would call an underlying trend in education. Not only in schools in our authority, but schools throughout Scotland, because the what was previously mentioned before by Jack is that the bar is certainly higher, and we have to take that. And for instance, to attain an excellent is a 1 is very, very rare, but it's there. To attain a good is what you would call is almost level. It's middle of the road. To attain a weak is down at the very bottom. And but having read the report in full, and then having read the report from Laxdale this morning, and I only read it cursory this morning, so well, a good report in fact. But there is this, and I believe that there is an underlying trend in it, and that is the emphasis on learning and teaching and assessment. And we seem to be failing. If we're honest in both schools, I would say, and in many of the schools we have it. And would we attribute this to, first of all, to an overcrowded curriculum? I don't speak to members of staff, I speak to teachers nowadays, and I would say, hardworking. They're hard worked because of the amount that's in the curriculum. And I would say some of the amount, it's what's happening, and this is my opinion, and I know it comes from a dinosaur point of view regarding education. We're missing out on the building blocks of education, the foundation blocks of education. And I see it. I happen to be a grandparent, but I'm also, when I go to visit homes and we talk about schools and I talk to the children in the homes, the ability of some of these young children to actually read basic books is to a large extent missing. And I believe we're taking in, and this is where I'm going to criticize again HMIE. HMIE have a cheek actually to start criticizing learning, teaching and assessment in our schools when they're closely associated with Education Scotland, who actually determine our curriculum and determine what is to be put into our curriculum. And I believe there's so much involved in our curriculum of peripherals. I go to schools and they're more interested in rights respecting schools than they are in the basic foundation of reading, writing and arithmetic. And I find that it's now coming up, and I know that the new director is intent on raising attainment, learning and teaching and attainment. And I hope that that will go, and instead of adopting every fancy from Education Scotland, we sift it and get rid of some of the peripheral, what I would call nonsense, and actually start teaching the basics of education so that by primary 3, they can actually read and write. I was in a house the other day and the child couldn't put a sentence together. Primary 3. So I would say to us, I think we're kowtowing to too much of what's been put out by Education Scotland, and it's having an effect now upon our schools. And I believe that's one of the underlying reasons for that. My question was, is it because of all that, somebody would say nonsense, but is it because of the fact that we are having an overcrowded curriculum, much more overcrowded than it was even 10 years ago?
I'll bring Donald in on this one. I'll let Donald answer this one. Yeah, I'll let Donald answer this one.
Yes, thank you, Councillor McLean. Specifically in terms of the report before us today, it's not, in answer to your question, it's not about a crowded curriculum. I think your question maybe goes beyond this report into the wider delivery of education, and there'll be differences of opinion about the crowdedness or not of the curriculum. We are, as an authority, and as are all other 32 authorities, wedded to curriculum for excellence as the structure of our curriculum. There is review amongst from Education Scotland of that and the work being done on what's now branded as Scotland's curriculum. And I think it will take on board some of what you raise. But in specifically in terms of this report, it was not to do with any aspect of crowded curriculum. What is a challenge for us is around making sure that we have a workforce equipped for the current national expectations around what learning, teaching and assessment in schools will look like. And I think that's where we have some challenge in terms of our understanding across our schools about the expectations that the system has, that Education Scotland has, that HMI has for learning, teaching and assessment in the 21st century. And we're working with the Northern Alliance as our Regional Improvement Collaborative, because that has been recognised across the whole of the north of Scotland as an issue. And the Northern Alliance has pulled away from a lot of other work that it's doing to focus solely and specifically on learning, teaching and assessment. We've been working with Head of Scrutiny for Education Scotland and making sure that we are getting programmes together to support staff for that. We've had all our head teachers from the Western Isles attend workshops with the Northern Alliance partners across the 8 local authorities of the North to analyse the issues around learning, teaching and assessment and how it's evaluated. But it's not just about the evaluation itself, and I want to get that across. It's not about just trying to prepare ourselves for the test. We do need to make sure that our learning, teaching and the assessment of that learning and teaching is fit for purpose and is fit for the life the young people want to have moving through their education. So it's an area that we do need to improve on. It's an area that's been recognised across many inspections across the north. So in terms of the report, it's not a matter of crowded curriculum in the wider sense of what Councillor McLean is raising. There is no doubt that the curriculum can become crowded in certain schools. There is a matter for schools to determine that to their own degree to somewhat, but there is recognition that there is work to be done in reshaping our curriculum, and the Education Scotland has set up recently a curriculum innovation group, which we have representation on, and is being led by Joan Mackay, and is looking at the future of Scotland's curriculum going forward, and we'll have participation in that as it moves on.
Okay, Cam.
Yeah, just that in answer to what the director says there, one of the key bullet points in the report is raise children's attainment in all aspects of learning. Now, to me, that's raising attainment. And and you cannot raise attainment unless you've actually got the foundation blocks of attainment, of learning. And we're missing out on that. And that's my key, and that is bearing on what is happening in Scotland and what is bearing to an extent in Blackstale.
Okay, right, thanks, Cam. I'll bring in Ranald Fraser now. Councillor Ranald Fraser online.
Thank you, Chair, and can I thank Mrs MacLeod for her report. I wonder if at this juncture Mrs MacLeod is in a position to provide the committee with an update as to the action points being worked upon within the action plan that's been described, and if it's possible to give detail of the timelines of implementing these areas of improvement in advance of the next inspection. Thank you.
I think so. I haven't got the action plan with me just now, but we are looking at areas of the curriculum actually, and looking at how the curriculum is built in Scotland and how it is delivered, through looking at aspects of planning with regards to that as well. Also looking at quality assurance, making sure that there's a robust quality assurance processes in place, and so that we can identify where there's gaps in learning quickly and put support in. We're also looking at areas of communication as well there, and bits of it is escaping me just now without it in front of me, but we are on track to undertake the action plan on time, and we're hoping that we will have it completed by June.
Okay, thanks. I'll just bring Donald in again.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Fraser, and also to Mrs MacLeod for that information on the action plan. The action plan is driven by the 4 actions identified in the report in the appendix to Mrs MacLeod's report, which is around increasing leadership, immersion in Gaelic, developing the curriculum, and as Councillor MacLean has already mentioned, raising children's attainment and looking at tracking. They're the 4 main drivers. And as the end of the report and the conclusion acknowledges, there will be a re-inspection of the school approximately a year on from publication, which will be round about October 2024, give or take. It won't be exactly to the day, a year from the publication, but it'll be around about that time. The action plan based on these 4 actions is in place now, and there are milestones within each term for the delivery of that, and the main actions are broken down into sub-steps that have their own timescales for delivery, and both Mrs MacLeod in the Chamber and Mrs MacLeod, who's supporting her from another school, have measures in place to make sure that that is being delivered. And an important area which parents have acknowledged to us that there's been significant strength, which there isn't specifically mention of in the report, is about communication and involvement of parents in improvement in the school. So as Mrs MacLeod has mentioned, there's intention that will be significantly completed and in place by summer of 2024, ahead of the re-inspection in October 2024. Upon re-inspection, it'll be re-evaluation of the same actions the inspection won't bring in other areas. The re-inspection will specifically look at re-evaluating the 4 actions in the appendix, and that's what will be the focus for the delivery of the action plan and the subsequent review of it.
Okay, Ranald.
Yes, thank you, Chair.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Okay, thanks. So if there are no other questions, who is there? Councillor MacDonald.
Yeah, thanks again, Chair. For once I find myself agreeing with Colin McLean. Yes. Maybe this is a question for possibly the leader and possibly Mr. Burr, with regard to their interactions with COSLA. Are we the only local authority who feel that what's been taught in schools possibly and what's been driven by the Scottish Government are at variance with what our children should be getting in schools, you know, like a broad, decent education? Or are most other local authorities in line with the Scottish Government and what they're trying to achieve with the school population? Because, you know, there seems to be a feeling, and I'm sure I've sensed it amongst most of us, that some of the stuff is pretty superfluous to a broad, decent, basic education. And I don't know, do we stand out as a local authority that's railing against what's getting taught in our schools, or are all the other local authorities broadly in step, wondering, you know, when the next change and the next raft of legislation is going to come down from Scottish Government? Because, I mean, obviously we go back to different eras. Things were much simpler then when we were in school, or when I was in school, certainly. And it's a generational thing, I'm sure of that. But what's been asked of our educationalists, our education department, our teachers, is so much more complicated now in terms of reporting, in terms of what they have to deliver, than it used to be when it was just, well, I hesitate to use basic teaching. There seems to be far more involvement of what I would consider superfluous to a good education involved in what goes on in schools. It's a difficult one because there's so much going on. There's so many additional factors nowadays. But are we out of step? Are local authorities broadly in step? The Scottish Government trying to deliver something that's unachievable? Are they living in the same real world that we seem to think we're inhabiting and they're not? You know, what's the consensus within COSLA and amongst other leaders? I'd like to ask, you know, is there far too much being demanded of our educationalists from Scottish Government and the Scottish Government education guidelines?
I'll bring Malcolm in online. If that's okay with yourself.
Yes, I'll try to be careful not to give my personal views here, which I tend to share the view that the curriculum is very crowded indeed, and teachers and schools are asked to deliver a lot of what might be considered social material as well as educational. But of course, there are subjective views in that. It's an interesting question. I mean, I would say it is the subject that is least discussed at COSLA leaders. In terms of curriculum or what might be called educational policy, it really doesn't appear very much on the COSLA leaders' agenda at all. And that is, dare I say, because it tends to be dominated by the curriculum. I think you know my views about local choice. I think there should be much more local choice in every aspect of policy delivery, because it is, after all, a statutory responsibility of this local authority and 31 others. And it seems inconsistent, therefore, that everything is determined through government agencies of whatever competence and complexity. So it's a subject which I think should feature more on the political agenda than it does, but it is heavily dominated, I would say, by the professional agencies and then by the committees which determine government policy on the curriculum. Thank you, Chair. I hope that's helpful.
Thanks. I mean, I was just going to add to that, Norrie, that I sit on the children's panel at COSLA, and there's no discussion about the curriculum being. I've never heard any discussion ever in any of the meetings about the curriculum being overcrowded or they're not happy with the curriculum. It's never come up. It's never been discussed. Not that I'm aware of, anyway. Council Leader. Oh, Susan's first. Sorry, you'll have to wait, Councillor. Susan's first. She beat you to it.
Thank you. Children are currently going through the education system is that the world has moved on from when we were at school. It's a much more complex world now, and as a result of that, we would be doing our children a disservice if we didn't give them a broad education that prepares them for that world. And that's my understanding of why we have more in the curriculum than just reading, writing and counting that maybe is some other people's experience. The other point I want to make is, do we as a local authority have a view that is out of step with the view of Education Scotland? I didn't appreciate that that was the case. If it is there a view within this council that we want something different? Thank you.
That's the one, Tom.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Thompson. I mean, I think the latter part of your question is maybe for the room to answer, but it's not something that I've been particularly observant of, I have to say. In my own professional networks, it's predominantly through the Association of Directors of Education for Scotland, ADIS, and that's a partnership of the senior officers from all 32 authorities, and that has a number of subgroups, one of them being the unfortunately titled Curriculum Assessment and Qualifications Group, shortened to CAC, as it often is. But it is an important group that does bring together the views of the 32 councils from the professional side, and that has not raised any significant concerns around curriculum in terms of what we were discussing today. There isn't that sense coming through across the nation. By far and away, the focus on that group has been around the senior phase and qualifications and education reform, and that's consumed that group's agenda, and it's what's consuming, I would say, a lot of the energy and attention nationally, which is about the output from our curriculum rather than the actual content and process that goes on before it. So I don't have a big sense of us being particularly out of step with what's happening nationally. I think where the step does come to some degree is that Curriculum for Excellence, or Scotland's curriculum as it's becoming, is an open and broad curriculum by design that does allow for a significant amount of personalisation and choice by schools and by teachers. But where the contradiction comes is from the inspection process, which, as Councillor McLean has identified from the inspection that's in front of you today, and the one that this, for those of you who weren't aware, the inspection of Laxdale School was published this morning. It'll come to the next series. It wasn't published in time to bring a report to this series. But there is a challenge for us there, and that's one of the things that professional associations and bodies are working with Scottish Government on through the reform agenda at the moment, about the articulation of the autonomy presented within Curriculum for Excellence and the expectations of inspection, and how schools are evaluated about their effectiveness in the delivery of curriculum. And curriculum is a quality indicator that sits within inspection, and the learning, teaching and assessment associated with that curriculum. So it's a complex picture, but I don't get a lot of noise or feedback around concerns about the actual content of the curriculum itself.
Do you want to come in, Leader? You want to say something as well quickly?
Yeah, I think a lot of the questions that Nori asked have been answered, but just to reiterate that leaders, it's not really come up. In terms of the curriculum, and I speak from a personal point of view here, I think certainly the primary level is excellent. There's a broad range, and the points that have been made already about, you know, inspecting needs to be a bit more kind of, if you're raising the bar, it's like what's happened with poverty. You know, if you just change the levels and people aren't in poverty, but they're still in poverty. So it's the same thing that's happening with the inspections in schools. It's not that anything's worse, it's just that they've changed the level. So it's not really fair when you're offering that kind of level of, you know, broadness across the piece that you're then focusing in on certain parts of it that you're not doing. So it's very difficult, and I feel for our staff. So that part of it's obviously not working well, but in terms of the broader curriculum and the changes that are going to be coming, I think it probably is more at the senior level. But like I say, I think most of the other questions were answered.
Yeah, thanks for letting me back in, Chair. Yeah, I mean, I'm sorry if Councillor Thompson picked me up the wrong way. I'm all for as eclectic an education for our kids as possible. You know, it's a different world that they're moving into now than the world we were set to inhabit back in the 60s and 70s. I was fortunate enough to have our headmaster in their junior secondary school as it was at the time, who would start an arithmetic lesson and then veer into moral philosophy and then politics and maybe a bit of geography and a bit of sociology and then, you know, a bit of history, classics, you name it. You know, we wandered about everywhere, and his only goal at the end of the day was to prepare us for the wider world. You know, he wasn't really interested in sticking too much to a structure. Today, he'd have been out in his ear in about 15 seconds because he wouldn't have been able to teach like that. But there seems to be a heck of a lot of paperwork and a heck of a lot of reporting, you know, and our teachers seem to be bogged down in all kinds of the minutiae of the detail. We've got now several levels of teacher above folk who are at the coalface, as it were, you know, to deliver on what's expected of schools and education departments now. And the whole thing seems to be a grinder of reporting and, you know, making sure that we meet the demands of the new curriculum and the new Scottish Government guidelines, etc. So we have to fit into these particular boxes, and there's an awful lot of work around it, you know, and it does hopefully deliver, you know, better rounded pupils for equipped to deal with the bigger, wider world. But education has become a miasma of reporting and further staffing issues, because I mean, I think our primary school had maybe 5 teachers, that was it, and a dinner lady. Today you'd have 5 teachers, a head teacher, a couple of executive head teachers, you'd have support staff, you'd have X, Y, and Z. So I mean, the landscape's changed, Susan, and maybe I'm a bit slow to react, but I feel sorry for folk today who are tasked with delivering education, because it's become a far more complicated issue than it ever was. And when we have external auditors as well, we've had the same thing with Audit Scotland coming in and comparing us as an island authority, and the criteria that they use seem to be, they don't make any concessions for the fact that we are a local and an island authority, and it's difficult when you're measuring against the criteria that they use to be fair. I think we've seen a couple of reports now that have come from external auditors which have been particularly scathing, and I think if they were applied fairly, I think they would have been a bit more understanding of the local circumstances, and that tends to be missed out in some of the reporting as well. So it's not easy, but I'm sure that we've got the right professionals equipped to deal with the task. So I'm very prepared to trust the teachers and the educationalists in this one. Thanks.
Okay, thanks. Sorry, I'm going to bring Councillor Francis Murray in. This will be the last one, because we're kind of I want to make it the last one because we're kind of moving away now from what we were actually the report in hand here. So I want to move on.
Thank you very much, Chair. Yes, I wanted to get back to the report and just remind everybody that there are individual staff involved, and it is difficult for staff in education, really, when the spotlight is on them like this. And yes, of course, you're answerable and to the parent community and the wider community, but particularly in small schools, but even in big schools in a community like ours, the staff are known. So I'm sure they've been given really good support by Mr. MacLeod, Mrs. MacLeod, and all the other people in the department that require that that will help them get through the action plan. I'm not going to say much about the curriculum because I could go on till 3 o'clock, so I will just contain my remarks to say I do think that there is, as Mr. MacLeod said, so much debate has gone on the senior phase, the 4th, 5th and 6th year, so that what happens is 1st, 2nd and 3rd year starts kind of imitating 4th, 5th and 6th year, and then the primary experience has to seem to be feeding into what's going to happen at the end of the day. And I think the report that's going to come on the joint work with Orkney and Shetland shows some really interesting comments on that on the BGE, and equally I think it's got useful messages for our primary education as well. But I think my main point here would be to support the staff involved. I think that's really important. Thanks.
Okay, thanks a lot, Councillor Murray. Okay, good. Right, so do members agree to note the report? Okay, thanks. Popular. The Scottish Attainment Challenge stretch aims for 2023-24. This report relates to the Scottish Attainment Challenge stretch aims report 2023-24. Again, Donald will speak to the report and answer any questions. Thank you, Donald. Bill.
Thank you, Chair. And this may be one of the reports that Councillor MacDonald is referring to, that's populate our system. I may have used other words, but I'll say populate our system at the moment. So this report comes before you today as members for your consideration, and it's in relation to the Scottish Attainment Challenge and a requirement annually to report on progress through the Scottish Attainment Challenge via the National Stretch Aims model. This is the second such report that's been produced. The first one was published last autumn, and it captures the requirement of all 32 local authorities to indicate what its stretch aims would be in relation to closing the poverty-related attainment gap in 5 core stretch aims that are common to all 32 local authorities, should I say, and also the capacity for local authorities to choose core plus stretch aims that are unique to themselves. So the report itself for the local authority for 23-24, which is actually 24-26, is included in appendices. There have been some important changes made to the reporting for the year ahead. The first iteration of stretch aims required a single year report. For that was the report for 23-24 that was presented previously. The report this year still requires annual reporting, but it's on rolling 3-year stretch aims, which is why I was saying this is the 23-24 report, but it's actually 24-26 is the measure that it's using. So the reports will in future still report every year, but will be on a 3-year rolling target for the achievement of the stretch aims. It's important to note that these stretch aims are around closing the poverty-related attainment gap specifically, and are not a measure of any other aspect of attainment. Many local authorities across Scotland are challenged by that because the measure that the Scottish Government wish local authorities to use is the comparison of the Scottish Index for Multiple Deprivation, quintiles 1 and quintile 5, comparison as an indicator of poverty gap. And for us and many other authorities across the country, we either have no data in these data sets or have very little meaningful data. So for us, we don't have any, and the requirement for us alternatively is to use free school meal information, which does come with a significant caveat of reliability in terms of small numbers and variation of uptake. But it is the only measure available to us that can be applied as a way of indicating a poverty-related attainment gap. So the report just introduces the stretch aims report itself, and the report in entirety is provided in appendices, and I'd be happy to take questions from members upon it.
Does anybody have any questions? Councillor Angus McCormack.
Thank you very much, Donald. This is one of these reports that does your head in. I'm not sure if it tells us a great deal, but I just wanted to follow up on your reference to SIMD and the fact that it doesn't apply in the islands. And I know that we've been trying very hard to use free school meals as a measure, but that's been complicated, certainly in the primary sector, by the fact that everybody gets free school meals. So what I'm wanting to ask you is, have we been able to find a means whereby we know all the children in the primary sector in particular who would normally have received free school meals, because it's a trigger to their receiving other benefits, like, for example, a free school uniform?
Yeah, thank you, Councillor McCormack. It is indeed a challenge for us in the purposes of this report, but it is also a challenge for us in understanding the nature of poverty across our islands. Whilst it's good in its own way to have the universal benefit of free school meal entitlement for all up to the end of primary 5, and for some gradually been rolled out to primary 6 and 7, it does make it difficult to gather meaningful data about uptake because it has resulted in a drop-off in application for free school meals in that cohort of children. We've been working with DWP, Social Security Scotland, to continue to promote the application for free school meals, even though the entitlement is already there, because of the access it gives to other benefits, particularly things like, as you mentioned, clothing grants, but also sometimes other payments. And there have been, Scottish Government have made a number of payments, particularly during COVID and post-COVID, to families using the free school meal application system. So we've always tried to promote that. We've also been undertaking work to try and identify families through sibling applications, where maybe a family has made an application for one child, possibly it's say an S3, and then backtracking that through other siblings where we know that information. We don't always know it robustly, depends on enrolment information, but where we know about siblings, we do try and capture that as well. In addition, we've been working for the last year with counterparts in Orkney and Shetland, because they have the same situation exactly as ourselves, where they have no children in the measured areas of quintiles 1 and 5 in SIMD. And we've been working together to try and find a solution to a systematic and reliable poverty attainment measure that doesn't use free school meals, and have been making reasonable headway with data officers in Scottish Government who hold much more information about our communities, about what we may be able to use. There are also, and we investigated this too, commercially available data sets that you can procure, but they do come at very significant cost. That would provide us with granular, more detailed than postcode level poverty information that's predominantly used in the commercial sector for identification of provision of businesses and so on, but is available for some authorities, and some authorities have already procured and used that instead of SIMD, but the cost is very significant for small authorities. So we've been working to try and, with Education Scotland, with Shetland Islands Council, Orkney Islands Council and Scottish Government, to try and find an alternative measure. We're not there yet, but progress is being made on it. So it is a challenge, Councillor McCormack, and we do what we can to try and promote the continuing uptake of free school meals, even though the entitlement is universal, and try and track through sibling knowledge of sibling applications.
Does anyone else have any questions? Anyone else? Councillor Cal McLean.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. It's to do with, I missed out, and I was going to mention, Councillor McCormack mentioned with the free school meals, the data. I agree entirely with what he says there. One of the stretch marks I noticed in education generally in Scotland is that for instance, to attain a D pass attire. Now, I don't know if the most recent head teacher could answer this one for us here. They've made D a pass attire. Am I correct in that? And they've reduced the pass mark to 37%. Now, I know that Mr. McCormack used to teach maths to a higher degree, and he would say that 37% would not be a pass mark. But is that correct?
I can maybe clarify here that it's still the case that A to C is a pass in terms of achievement of the higher, but a D is an award, so it still carries points that the young person can accrue, but isn't a pass. It's not recognised as a pass. So A to C is still pass, but D is an award that carries tariff points. And in terms of the bandings for pass rates at each individual level within an award, that varies year to year based on what the SQA determines. I can defer to a colleague if she wishes to add to that, but that's the current position.
Thank you. Yeah, that's absolutely correct. As you would expect, A to C still is a pass, but a D is an award. So, for instance, if you'd sat National 5 one year and then you sat your higher the next year and you got a D, at least you were getting some points above what you'd got the previous year, recognising that it was a higher qualification that you were doing, but it doesn't actually count as a pass as such. And as Mr. MacLeod said, when the SQA set their pass marks, it can vary hugely from year to year depending on the cohort, and they mark the papers and then they see where the marks are lying. So as there have been years, I think particularly in higher maths, where it's been deemed a very hard paper, that the mark has been brought down, but other subjects are really high. And I can also think of a recent year where an A at higher maths was way above 70%, which was always what you imagined would be the cut-off for an A. So yeah, these things vary from year to year.
7 was a wee bit low, but it is a pass. It is a pass in D at D level. In maths and English, that was
Award rather than a pass. Yeah. If it's a D, no, it's not a pass. It is an award, but sometimes the award can be as low as. Yeah.
Okie dokie, right. Okay, if there's no other questions, which I'm almost afraid to ask, do members agree to the recommendations at 3.1? Thank you. Right, item 9, Three Islands Collaborative and Improvement Review. Item 9 relates to the Three Island Collaborative and Improvement Review. Donald McLeod will speak to the summary of the report and answer any questions. Thanks, Donald. Yes, again.
Thank you, Chair. And this is a report that's been alluded to already this morning and now afternoon on a number of occasions in terms of the context that it provides for other business that we've been talking today. This is the second of 3 collaborative reviews, self-evaluation, partnership reviews that we've been undertaking. It's a system that was initiated by ADES, the Association of Directors of Education for Scotland, nationally, as a main driver to demonstrate that local authorities can and should and are the right people to evaluate and identify and lead on improvement in their own areas. It's been done in partnership with Education Scotland, notably not Inspectorate, but Education Scotland officers that work within the Northern Alliance and within the other regional improvement collaboratives. And then all of the 32 local authorities have agreed to participate in these and host a collaborative review and also participate in those of others. The agreement for the Three Island authorities in recognition of our similar context was to create a trio for the purposes of these evaluations. The first of these reported last year and was shared with you at a previous committee last year, which focused on the senior phase offer and the transition from senior phase into post-school destinations. The second review, it was agreed by the Three Island directors at the time to focus on the broad general education in S1 to 3, with a perspective on how that interfaces with the move from primary into S1 and from S3 into S4. It was agreed to have a focus on 3 key areas: the curriculum offer itself, the curricular transitions, which I've just referenced, and also the functions of assessment, collaborative moderation and achievement within that broad general education phase. The initial part of the report provides detail on the process that was undertaken, but then in section 7, it provides detailed findings from the review group, which was made up of, as I mentioned, fellow officers from local authorities through ADES, Education Scotland officers and officers of the 3 authorities and their schools. So the predominant amount of section 7, 7.1, 7.2, 7.3 focus on the collective feedback across all 3 island authorities. So it's important that that's not solely just about our 4 schools in the Western Isles. It is a collaborative feedback across all the secondary schools across Orkney, Shetland and Western Isles, although it is agreed that these are big common messages. And there are many strengths within that as well as issues for development. 7.4 includes specific feedback on the context of Gaelic medium education within the secondary BGE. It was agreed that that was an important element for the Western Isles, and additional officers were provided external to the authority to participate and provide self-evaluation feedback on specifically Gaelic in the context of the BGE. So there are, within the report, a number of strengths being identified, but there are also significant areas for consideration for us to move forward on improvement. And it echoes some of what's already been talked about here today. One of the most important in particular was around the structure of the curriculum in S1 to 3, and a sense that it has not really moved on in the context of curriculum for excellence, that in many schools across the 3 islands, there was still a sense of being wedded to a pre-CFE system of S1 2, S3 4 S5-6, and that's the 2+2+2 model that's referenced in the report. Whereas the structure of curriculum for excellence in its truest sense is a 3, S1 to 3, and then a senior phase S4, 5, 6. And it was very much recognised that schools are reporting to have that kind of model, but actually behind it still sits more traditional models of curriculum delivery. Some schools reporting a 2+1+1+2 model. So these are areas that we do have to address. Additionally, as well, there was a real sense of a curriculum that hadn't progressed, and a teaching and learning offer that hadn't progressed and wasn't reflective enough of a skills-based and applied learning and interdisciplinary learning approach. And very much as has been referenced here today, all been about basically being a holding pattern for the senior phase, and the senior phase being the only thing that counts, and that the BGE is either a holding position or a pathway towards what matters in the senior phase. So some real challenges for us and what we take forward from that into our next year's improvement plan for the authority. And also very importantly for us as a local authority, the comments around Gaelic medium education in the broad general education in S1 to 3. Some important positive messages, but also some hard conversations with us about the experience as a Gaelic medium pupil who has come through a high quality immersive experience in P1 to P7, not necessarily being sustained through S1 to 3. So a challenging report in some ways for us, but evidence, I think, of strong collaboration and an ability for authorities to demonstrate that we can undertake this work ourselves and are able to be honest with ourselves and identify and lead improvement without the need for external evaluation. But I'm happy to take questions on the report itself and the findings or any matters relating to it.
So are there any questions? Councillor Francis Murray.
Thank you very much. Not so much a question, just more a comment that I think this ties item 7, the HMI report, and number 9 together very neatly, because as a number of us said, and item 6 as well, that the failure of bodies sometimes to take into account the island context is frustrating. And here, if we can do honest and sometimes brutally honest collaboration together and self-evaluation with our island counterparts, then there aren't other schools in Scotland that have as much in common with our schools as the schools in Orkney and Shetland. And we have these schools that, in the secondary that we're kind of compared with, which are generated, but it's very rarely Kirkwall or Anderson High that the Nicholson gets compared with, but in actual fact the experience is so similar. I think it's a very valuable collaboration.
Thanks, Francis. So, is there anyone else? So if there are no other questions, what are we doing here? We're insofar as the interests of no, not on that one. Sorry. Sorry. Yeah, just do members agree to recommendation at 3.1? No, yeah, 3.1. Thank you. Right, so item 10, support for local sports councils. Item 10 relates to the support for local sports councils and seeks approval for the continued financial support for the 2 local sports councils. Ian Gigi Campbell will speak to the report and answer any questions. Is Gigi available? Thanks. Okay, thanks, Gigi.
Hi, thanks, Chair. Yeah, this is the annual request from for funding from our 2 sports councils, from our sports and sports grants budget, with what 74 clubs and 5 associations. There's thousands of young people, mainly young people, benefiting from the range of grants that are provided through the sports councils. To things like travel to events, coach education, equipment for their clubs, and so on. I should point out as well that you may have noticed Lewis and Harris Sports Council changed their name to Club Sport Lewis and Harris at their last AGM. This is in line with the national body, Scottish Club Sport, who recently changed their name. US and Barra Sports Council will be reviewing over the coming months the change of name as well. So just to point that out, though it's maybe easier to just call them sports councils. I don't know. I'll leave that to yourselves. So yeah, it's to get approval for the continued funding for the two sports councils to carry on their good work.
So, is there any questions? And if not, do members agree to note the recommendation at 3.1? I keep saying that. I've got it in my head. You see that? You see. Agreed. Right. Yep. Okay. Thanks, Gigi. That was a thumbs up on that one. Yeah. Thanks. Cheers.
Thank you.
So, item 11, Chief Social Work Officer Annual Report 2022-23. This relates to the Chief Social Work Officer's report. Jack Louis will speak to the report and answer any questions. Do you want to, Jack?
Thank you again, Chair. So the report covers child, adult and justice services, but today we will focus specifically on children's services. The report begins by looking at our demographics, which makes for some challenging reading, admittedly, and helps explain some of the workforce challenges that we touched on earlier today. I'm going to jump forward in terms of service quality and performance and looking specifically at child protection. This reporting period has seen the introduction of the National Minimum Data Set for child protection committees, which provides improved and more meaningful data. And this is most welcome and something that we've been asking for some time. This reporting period, we've seen the revised National Child Protection Guidance, which was launched in September 21. Overall, our level of implementation of the guidance has progressed smoothly and is on track for full implementation within the stated time frame. During the reporting period, we initiated an ongoing schedule of audit and review of child protection casework. Audit activity remains more critical than ever, as children's services have not been inspected since 2016. And whilst nobody welcomes an inspection to a certain extent, I think it's important myself in terms of offering reassurance to our community that the services that we do provide to them are of a good and suitable standard. Audit activity has raised a number of key areas of strengths, which you'll find at 2.8 and at 2.9, and there's 3 areas for improvement, which are the use of chronologies and ensure accurate and up-to-date assessment and plans are shared across relevant partner agencies, and initiating interagency referral discussions when a concern arises in an already open case to a service. Moving on, you'll see at 2.19 the number of children subject to child protection reports, which offer some reassurance that our rates are not far away from the national average. And at 2.21, we looked at the number of children subject to initial referral discussions. Whilst it is suspected that the relatively low number of IRDs per 110,000 population is explained by early intervention and prevention measures taking place, we are going to do some additional audit activity which will just offer reassurance that that is the case. And moving forward to 2.22, the above graph shows the number of children subject to IRDs in the reporting period. This figure is more in keeping with the national average, and read alongside the table at 2.19, the evidence is fewer children are subject to repeat IRDs, which is a very positive trend. Looking at youth justice, and we've discussed youth justice and rightly so in some detail today, this reporting period has seen continued challenges with youth offending and antisocial behaviour. And as Councillor Mackenzie pointed out, it is predominantly in the town of Stornoway. Both locally and nationally, for this reporting period, we have witnessed an increase in both the number of children being referred to SCRA on offence grounds and an increase in the number of offences. Now, what I'm not saying is that it's hard to sort of distinguish between the two, because it's encouraging, I believe, that more people in the community are passing on concerns about youth offending and antisocial behaviour. We've asked them to do that, and they've responded by doing that. What we do know in the past that not all incidents of antisocial behaviour and youth offending were being passed on to us. So it is really important that we do have the numbers, and but we need to look at this longitudinally now. In response to this, Youth Justice Group, as Donald mentioned, meets monthly to do the effectiveness of strategies used and to monitor progress that otherwise with the individual children's plans. I myself do not think there's a lack of meetings. I attend many meetings in relation to many things, including youth justice, but there's not always a direct connectivity between the amount of meetings you attend and the impact of these meetings. We do need to ask ourselves, are we making the best of the meetings that we are having? And too many young people are progressing from low level, very occasional offending behaviour to higher level and more sustained behaviours. We need to review the partnership, preventive and early intervention approaches. And I was going to mention earlier that in response to Councillor Mackenzie's comments around the impact on the community, we are sympathetic and we are cognisant of the impact some of these behaviours are having on our community members, be they vulnerable adults or indeed children, because very often children themselves are on the receiving end of offending and antisocial behaviours. Moving on to care experience, children and young people and the promise. As part of our journey to keep the promise, we want to continue reducing the number of children and young people who are living away from their families, and for those who do have to live away from their immediate family, improve the services that we provide them with. Over the past 20 years, the average number of children on a compulsory supervision order each year has been 39. That's the average, with a high of 59 in 04-05 and a low of 26 in 22-23. So in 22-23, we have had the lowest number of children on compulsory supervision orders in 20 years. And I do think that evidences to a certain extent the progress we're making in keeping the promise in the Western Isles. And again, we've touched on this earlier, we've got but one children's house in the Western Isles. 2.29 evidences that there's an increase in the use of that facility from 1126 nights previous reporting year to 1259 nights this previous year. This comes from the back, remember, of a decision that was taken here, committee to cut the number of beds at Hillcrest from 4 to 3. But we may have cut the number of beds, but we haven't certainly affected the demand on the service. Children with disabilities, the demand for short breaks and outreach respite remains consistent. What I would also say remains consistent is the feedback we get from families in receipt of short break and outreach respite, which is very good and excellent, and it's a highly appreciated service in our community. Moving on to child and adolescent mental health and wellbeing. Over the past 12 months, we have continued to see a high uptake of services for children and young people with mental health and emotional wellbeing difficulties. And whilst it is positive, the uptake of services is increasing, the real positive outcome is for this figure to fall over time. These services, whilst useful and there's more acceptance in terms of young people accessing them, the true test of getting it right is the number of children and young people in our community experiencing mental health and emotional wellbeing difficulties should be declining. And in terms of referrals to CAMHS, there's been an increase of 55.9% between 2019 and 23. This is possibly a post-pandemic issue and influence, although time will tell, but that is a significant increase again in a 4-year period. So, Chair, I suppose I look at this report a bit like an MOT, and I believe the service has passed its MOT, but there are a few advisories on the form we need to pay cognizance of. Thank you, Chair. Happy to take any questions.
Thanks, Jack. Does anybody have any questions at all? Councillor Callum McLean.
Thanks, Chair. Just thanks for that. It's a full report, in Jack, but there's one or two items that one in particular, and student 233. It's to do a positive note. There have been the following downward trends And one of them you mentioned is this 1, 2, 3, 4th bullet point down. Social issues, including friendship problems, have reduced from 7.5 to 3.3% in 2023. Well, I don't know. Maybe I should frame it this way. These social issues often are not reported. The friendship part of it are not reported. I'll be quite honest with you. In the last 3 weeks, I've had 4 parents speaking to me about social issues, friendship groups, and it was heartbreaking, to be quite honest with you. Heartbreaking is what I can say. And maybe sometime I'll speak to you about the issues, some of them. But what I'm saying is that is a significant number that I've had in just within a month, more so than in 6 years I've been in here. So I'm just saying to that such things as these are, I would say, especially friendship problems is a thing, or bullying, or whatever we like to call it, is one of these things that are often go without being reported. The person is lonely, the family are lonely, family are left out, and the family are left to themselves. So I think that's I'm just pointing that out here as a 3.3% maybe on the unreported side.
By way of explanation, Councillor McLean, so when the Child and Adolescent Mental Health Services receives any new referral, and when indeed they meet with a child or young person for the first time, they go through a list, I suppose, of the reasons for the referral issues affecting that young people. So that's where they get their data from. But you do make a very important point in terms of, and I should probably have touched on it, is the impact of social media on our children and young people. And in fact, I was listening to a very interesting lecture on it the other night, where we can't underestimate. So whilst there are great opportunities that come from social media, at the same time, children who are experiencing, for example, friendship issues, bullying issues, whether within school or indeed that can take place out with a school environment, there's no getting away from it. I got bullied in school, but when I went home at the end of the school day, I got away from it and I had respite until the next school day. Our young people today don't have that same respite that I and others had back in the day. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Chuck. There are no other questions. Do members agree to note the report recommendation at 3.1? Okay, thanks. So we'll move on to our reports outstanding. That's just for noting. There's nothing, no questions from that. Oh, Councillor McLean.
Yeah, can I say, Chair, about reports outstanding? I can't get it up at the moment, but one of the reports that was going to come to the committee was on Confucius education in schools. Last time I looked at this, it wasn't on it.
I think it clarified there's an administrative error here. I think I don't know if you want to clarify on it, Derek. A mistake on the paperwork.
Yep. So.
Yeah, that's correct. The last point in point 3 should be referring to the Confucius. We'll update that, and that will be reported to a future meeting. So that's just an apologies error on our point. We appear to have repeated 2 points there.
That's fine. Thanks.
Okay, cheers. Right, so the next scheduled meeting of the committee will be on the 6th of February 2024, and just like to wish, before we move into private, just want to wish everybody a happy festive season and just best for the new year. And we're back here again next year. Right, so we'll now move into private, please. Right, okay. So